Oh, Islam, don't think I forgot about you. Just because Christianity is more rampant in my country here in the US doesn't mean you get a free pass. I will not stop until science becomes the one true religion. Anyway, here's the debate being held in public. Ignore the dubbing, I think it was not held in English.
Today's topic is beliefs. Do you believe in something?
I have faith in love. I don't adhere to any religious beliefs. You could call me an atheist, deist, or many other things. I'm a non-believer.
Do you acknowledge the existence of a creator? Because atheism denies the presence of a creator.
Well, I don't believe in the existence of a creator. I believe in energy.
A little bit of a weird thing to say. I don't believe in a creator, but I believe in energy. I mean, why mention even energy here? It almost feels like this interview was set up from the eyes of a creationist, because creationists will often just claim atheists believe in energy making up the universe, when in reality an actual atheist or scientist wouldn't just randomly mention energy here. I just found it weird, that's all. They don't really talk about it, so whatever.
I don't accept the existence of a god like Allah in Islam. If there were a being like him, our current state wouldn't be like this. God should feel ashamed of our condition and question his actions, saying, "What am I doing?" The things that have led me to where I am today are those concepts about the origin of humanity. They simply don't make sense to me, those absurdities. I mean, Islam states that humanity originated from Adam and Eve. I mean, how is this possible? You know, billions of people from two humans. How does that work? I mean, from two humans, how can that be?
Indeed, good point. This is something I mentioned quite a few times on my channel. It is quite literally impossible for two human beings to have the genetic diversity to create all the types of races and ethnicities of people in the world today. The fact that there are 8 billion people on Earth is slightly irrelevant. It's the diversity of people that matter here in the amount of time. You could have 8 billion people and all are Korean, but if that were the case, then sure, two people could perhaps possibly have created that over the course of however many years. However, that is just simply not the case, and for two people to have the genetic information to compensate for all the diversity we see today, absolutely impossible.
Let's consider this, brother. You see, there is one Earth, but from that one Earth, hundreds of thousands of different species of fruits and vegetables grow. Did hundreds of thousands of different things originate from one? They did.
Okay, that's correct.
From this perspective, if the Creator can create all those entities from one Earth, then it is reasonable to assume that hundreds of thousands of diversities can arise from a single human. This is a logical conclusion.
I don't see how that's logical in any way, shape, or form. You use an analogy of variety of fruit that comes from the Earth, but that's not how reproduction works. Now, if the analogy was hundreds of thousands of plants come from the same seed, then that'd be a different story, but in reality, of course, that doesn't happen. Your analogy is basically saying because all dogs breathe air, dogs then came from only 2 dogs. The environment or the nourishment is irrelevant here. What matters is the passing down of genetic information, which last I checked, plants don't inherit that from the soil. So your analogy doesn't actually work here, nor does it make any logical sense. If we didn't know anything about how genetics work, then sure. But luckily for us, we do have that, so we need to use what we already know to arrive at the truly logical conclusions.
Moreover, consider the following. When we examine things from a DNA standpoint, considering the transmission of genes, we can observe the potential for diversity. Today, we are aware that the genes of both the mother and father can vary and be passed on to the next generation. I mean, it's not far-fetched. Parents possess different characteristics. Thus, their child can inherit a blend of these features. Genes can be transferred, enabling diversity.
Indeed, the biggest advantage of sexual reproduction is the fact that it promotes diversity within a population. Take a group of organisms that reproduce asexually, for example, and after a few generations, not much has changed, especially compared to a group that reproduces sexually. However, sexual reproduction, although making their children different from themselves, is still limited to the genetics of the parents. Take blood type, for example. A person with type O blood and a person with type B blood will never create a child that is type A blood. Of course, the majority of genes are more complicated than blood type, but you get the idea. And we're not just talking about a blood type, we're talking about the entire human genome, about 20,000 genes, all of which have their own varieties.
Likewise, the Creator could have endowed Adam and Eve with diverse genetic traits expressed through their DNA. It is not illogical to conceive that all diversity originated from them.
No, it is quite literally impossible for two human beings to hold the genetic information of all the human beings we see today, unless you accept some crazy mutation rates which are not physically possible. For example, there could be a gene that has thousands of alleles, and each person can only hold a few of them at a time. In that case, it would be physically impossible for two human beings to hold all of them. One example are HLA genes, which could have up to millions of diverse alleles across the entire human population, such as DRB1. The only explanation is that these HLA genes have been accumulated over an incredible amount of time by many, many more than just 2 individuals.
However, people today are born from regular mothers and fathers. Each generation is formed through parental reproduction. But when discussing the first man, as described directly from the earth, we can also examine it from a different perspective.
There's a concept in evolutionary biology and natural history called bottlenecking. In short, a bottleneck is when a population is significantly reduced to a certain amount, which could be caused by a variety of factors such as natural disaster. Understanding bottlenecks is an important concept because it greatly impacts the genetic pool of a given population. Usually because the population shrinks, genetic diversity lowers, which can allow for many things to happen, such as quick shifts in genetic pools, inability to adapt to rapid changing environments, and threatening of extinction. The smaller the population, the greater the threat of the stability of that population to survive. It is proposed that humans actually went through bottlenecks before. Well, not specifically Homo sapiens, but our ancestors. For example, the Homo erectus went down to a few thousand individuals, which lasted for a very long time in threatened extinction, and humans aren't the only examples we have. Today, we see plenty of animal populations bottlenecks, and when it comes down to a few hundred, that's when it really starts getting dangerous. Low genetic diversity creates a lot of downstream problems, such as higher incest rates, which promotes life-threatening alleles to become more common, greatly affecting reproduction abilities, being vulnerable to single disasters, falling behind competitors. There's just so many problems. And these are all issues that would threaten populations that go down to a few thousand. Animals that have their populations shrunk to a few hundred wouldn't be able to survive without human intervention. Now take that and turn it to 2 people. Literally impossible.
Considering these 3 viewpoints, taking into account the 3 pieces of evidence, this is not an absurd notion.
Huh? What 3 evidence? I heard absolutely nothing that is evidence. Look, even if what you said is compelling, it's not evidence because it'd be a counterpoint to an argument challenging your position. Evidence is when you start from 0, where we don't believe in anything, and that evidence allows us to tend towards a particular conclusion. So you haven't presented any evidence. Sorry.
In fact, there are 2 real possibilities. Either matter is the driving force, or there's a creator who shapes matter.
Wait a minute, what makes you think there are only these 2 possible conclusions? First of all, science doesn't just say matter created the universe. If anything, it's the other way around. Second of all, you basically just put this in the light of science vs religion, when in reality, technically, those are not the only 2 possibilities. Of course, science has tons and tons of evidence for, but let's ignore that and get more creative. The universe could have been created by Allah, yes, but it also could have been created by a pink dancing elephant. It could have been created because we live in a simulated universe. Or perhaps it was created by Master Hand from Super Smash Bros. Oh, what about the thousands of other religions? Look, this is why evidence is defined as something that proves your one specific position, not just counter another position. Because even if you prove science wrong, you still have to prove against the infinite number of other possibilities that exist.
Observing the universe, we witness 2 types of creation. The first is the emergence from nothingness. The second is the construction from pre-existing matter. When we examine these 2 forms of creation, if something arises from nothing, if an entity emerges out of non-existence, surely there must be an eternal being that has always existed independently. Because it does not exist, it cannot create itself when it does not exist, right, brother?
Yes.
No, why is the only path available that matter created itself? You use the word nothing incorrectly here, which I notice a lot of creationists do. There wasn't nothing before the Big Bang. There's plenty of work in theoretical physics that aims to discover what there was before the Big Bang, but there definitely wasn't nothing. You essentially created a straw man and tried to logically debunk it without actual hard evidence, and thought that was enough to prove your God. Ridiculous.
Yeah.
That entity is already inherent in nothingness. For instance, let's assume you open your garage and there you find a Ferrari. You would think someone must have placed it here.
Yeah.
Likewise, we say, it's not as if the car appeared on its own. Similar to this example, if the universe came into existence from nothingness, there must be a cause that brought it into being.
Ah yes, the watchmaker argument. I'm so tired of this. Look, a car and the universe are completely 2 different things. You cannot draw the conclusion that someone created the universe just because we know a human being created a car. We've seen cars be made, we've seen it be transported, etc. The universe, on the other hand, nothing. I'm not going to say any more regarding this topic because it's just a dead horse at this point.
When we examine the matter, we observe its tendency to change. What does the law of entropy indicate? It states that matter deteriorates. Now, if matter is subject to decay and change, we can conclude matter cannot be eternal, because anything that changes cannot be eternal. It cannot be eternal. For instance, consider iron. It oxidizes and disappears, or matter wears out and ceases to exist. Hence, the matter is not eternal. What is eternal cannot undergo change. Therefore, I have ruled out the matter.
I don't like how you just use matter to generalize to literally all physical concepts here. The second law of thermodynamics refers to a few things, such as the storage and state of energy. Energy, for example, becomes less and less useful, which is a separate topic compared to, say, matter being able to assemble itself into things like stars, planets, or living organisms. When the Big Bang happened, the universe started off as an incredibly low entropy state. And right now, the formation of everything we see today doesn't invalidate the second law of thermodynamics, because the overall entropy of the universe has increased. Just because human beings are here doesn't violate that law. But then again, you're actually doing a more ridiculous take of this argument, because you're just assuming that matter, or whatever you're really trying to refer that as, is eternal, which is just a straight up guess. Not to mention, you have no idea what would happen in the future, much less for eternity. Okay, so in conclusion, this is just a stupid point.
I would say a creator independent of matter chose to bring it into existence from nothingness. Because this creator must be self-sufficient, existing perpetually. If it is not matter, then it must be the creator.
Well, no, like I mentioned before, you still have an infinite number of possibilities to disprove, so good luck on that.
We can now see the second type of creation. It involves constructing something by assembling others. Trees are created and animals are created. We can call it a process of building. Let's reconsider the second option. For something to be built, 4 characteristics must come together. What are these? Knowledge, will, power, and life. Knowledge is the possession of information. Will is the ability to make choices. Without the capacity to choose, one cannot build anything. Power is the strength to build. A paralyzed entity with no power and no strength cannot build anything. And fourth is life. If you lack life, if you're lifeless, is there even a need to discuss it?
What is this stupid reasoning that has absolutely no evidence behind it?
No, there isn't.
Let's consider a small example. Imagine you are on a beach, and if you want to build a sandcastle, you must possess these 4 characteristics simultaneously. Otherwise, you wouldn't even be able to construct a single structure using the sand. Therefore, we say that every 3 seconds, a new person is born into the world, undergoing the process of construction. Millions of living beings, including animals and plants, and their variations. When we observe the diversity of these species, we realize that millions of living beings are constructed daily. Considering how these entities are built, the presence of the 4 features is indispensable.
Yeah, but not only do you make up these 4 categories, they're also completely abstract concepts. Sorry, sir, we're trying to talk about reality here, where physical evidence is the only thing that matters. If you're trying to talk God into existence, then that's simply not going to work. Sorry. We're going to skip this part because there's not much else super productive with this conversation. I'd like to thank my patrons, Fireshard, Alan Morton, Rick Klen, and Bomanium for their support on Patreon, and I'll see you in the next one.